And today, I would like to present to you SynSense, the product that could save you from the dangers in your backyard.
By the way, I'm Charles, and that's Par.
I'm Para. I remember one of the most exciting days of my young life was meeting with my uncle, who was an oil tanker. He was the captain of an oil tanker. And my mom had told me stories about how he was a proud, healthy, athletic Indian man. But then, it turns out when I met him, he was forgetful. He had anxiety over here. He had anxiety problems, and he was constantly just in a muck. A month after we left, he was in the hospital. He was bedridden. He couldn't leave the hospital, and it was because of cadmium poisoning from the fuel rods in the oil tanker had given him cadmium poisoning. And sure enough, he was never able to walk again. Now he runs a culinary business out of his house. Anyway, there's a lot of dangers that are associated with heavy metal poisoning, and my uncle is a fantastic example of how quickly they can onset themselves and how great the ramifications can be for both the patient and for the patient's family. So in the short term, heavy metal poisoning, and when I say heavy metals, I'm talking about all the trans iron elements, including cadmium, nickel, manganese, etc. In the short term, they can have a lot of ramifications for vital organs, including the blood composition, kidneys, liver function, and the lungs. And in the long term, they can induce the onset of dementia symptoms that are similar to Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and tachycardia, which is an irregular heartbeat. This is a more uncommon symptom, which I'd like to highlight, which is argyria. It's discoloration of the skin. So like I said, there are a variety of unusual symptoms that can occur from heavy metal poisoning that have a variety of ramifications.
Okay, so our solution to detect for these heavy metals that can cause these afflictions is called SynSense. SynSense is an all-organic, completely made out of bacteria biosensor that can detect for these heavy metals safely, easily, and effectively, and inexpensively. Compared to our competitors, we can detect for it safely because our competitors use chemical reducing agents to detect for the presence of these metals that then form a chemical reaction. These reagents themselves are harmful. So why expose yourself to harmful reagents to detect for harmful chemicals? It's easy and effective. Our sensor can produce results in less than 4 hours, and it's very inexpensive compared to our industry competitors. I think the closest competitor is only $12, but requires 24 hours to garner a response. And this is what our kit would look like. We basically have these small vials of bacteria, and these bacteria have been genetically engineered to detect the presence of heavy metals. And basically, you dip either your sample of water, urine if you want to test for your blood, or soil into the vial. And if there is heavy metal contamination, there will be the release of HCG, and you can basically dip in a pregnancy test, very cheap, a few dollars at Rite Aid if you ever got one. And if it's positive, then you do have the heavy metal contamination. And Farm will go into a bit of depth on how it works.
So now I'll talk about the rock-solid science behind this. So the research that we did to develop this product was selected as the second overall international winners in this new field, in the iGEM competition, which was in this new field of synthetic biology. Which basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take DNA, genes, and proteins, which we've heard so much about in the last few years, and create useful tools with them, actually engineer our own products and make them do useful actions. So what I have up here is a gene network. I know it looks daunting, but it's actually very simple. What I have is, in blue are 2 genes, and basically all that's happening is the number 6, which is the some kind of heavy metal particle, comes and binds to what's called a transcription factor. And basically that's just a molecule that turns on the transcription of this gene. Transcription means the production of the protein corresponding to that gene. And what's going to happen is we're going to get a feedback response out of our bacteria when they're exposed to the presence of that metal particle. So basically, like Charles said, what's going to be produced is synthetic HCG, which is the protein that's detected by the common pregnancy test. So what I'm expecting the usage of this product to be is that we have these vials, you can pour in your samples, stick in the pregnancy test after a few hours, and boom, we can see with a simple color coordination change, if we have the presence of these heavy metals.
So looking in our own backyard, we actually honed in on a huge market opportunity. By calculating the customer profile of U.S. residents, we found that 309 people with 2.7 people per household in 114.4 million households. If they use a kid a year, which is $19.99, we're looking at a TAM analysis of $2.279 billion a year. And this is right where we expected, being above $1 billion and under $10 billion. Expanding it from our own backyard to the whole entire world, we found that with the world population rapidly increasing with 7.058 billion people currently living, there is a much bigger market. With places like Iran and China, heavily dense populations, Oxford Journals actually stated that 90% of their surrounding environment is contaminated with heavy metal pollutants. And this actually is the prime catalyst of birth defects and the other symptoms that we talked about earlier. And the global rise, statistically speaking, from the U.S. Census and Oxford Journals, bioaccumulation and biomagnification is on the rise. So it may all start at the bottom of the food chain, with the bumblebee, for example, species which is widely affected by these heavy metal toxins. We need the bumblebee in order to have vegetation. And it all starts at the bottom of the food chain, but with the bottom of the food chain being poisoned, the rest of the organisms can't survive. And it will slowly move up the food chain to us ourselves. And it all starts with testing our own backyard.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the competitive analysis that we've done in seeing what else is on the market right now. So I've highlighted 4 main competitors: Ozumex, Life Extension, Metametrics, and Millennium Nutritionals. And you can see that one of them simply can't compete with us with price. Life Extension at $265.33. It's mainly intended for sale and distribution to clinics, and it's well established, so we're not looking at the clinic market as a main point of access because it has a very difficult ease of entry. What we found with the others is that we have a distinct advantage over them in some fundamental way. We can see with Ozumex that it's a home test with one metal, but however, it's very unsafe because it uses acids. By contrast, we have established that our product is very safe. It uses non-toxic bacteria and that you'll never actually come in contact with. Next, Metametrics. The price is reasonable, $30, but again, that you cannot actually get access to this in the home setting. It's only distributed to clinics. That's another problem. And it has a time scale of days, whereas we're able to get results in hours from our test. The next competitor is Millennium Nutritionals, and we found that this is our closest competitor. We're going to do a little bit more detailed analysis in the next slide. Basically, there's 2 main cons to Millennium Nutritionals. It's composed of dithazone, and if you look at the MSDS, which is basically a big list of warnings about the chemical, we found that it's considered to be a mild toxin, which means that what you're bringing into your house to test your kids, your loved ones, may not be safe. We also found that we're able to provide 50% more tests. They're providing 2 tests per package, and we're providing 4. And also, ours is 33% cheaper. We're selling ours for $20, they're selling it for $30. They do, we will admit that they have one pro, which is that they can get feedback in minutes, whereas ours is on the time scale of maybe 1 or 2 hours.
All right, so doing our segment choice and logic, we found that industry would be our segment of interest because it comes in with the highest one of the highest values, because the people who run the company are concerned with their employees and how they're being exposed to these heavy metal toxins. So being able to distribute these through the industry, we can also have an endorsement value with the company endorsing us personally. The competitors, we do have our share of competitors, however, we feel that we beat them on all scales of that. And easy to dominate or sell with bacteria. With an initial investment, we can continually regrow the cultures. Therefore, after our initial investment, our resources are practically extremely cheap, and we've homed in on a very large market with the industry, with there being very industries in the capital world and global world. And that brings us up to a total of 38 compared to our other industry segments.
So in light of the analysis that Morgan described earlier, we think it would be best to first attack industry. We think that it would be good to help industry comply with OHSA, the Occupational Health Safety Act, and we think that if industry is using these kits to help detect for heavy metals, those workers who are tested would help pretty much spread our name. Say oh, I was just tested for heavy metals using SynSense. It's a very easy name to remember. After that, we would probably attack the market with those with prior health conditions. And this is a very large market. And there's a high endorsement value as well, because those people will also probably talk to their friends and family members about a recent test that they've taken for heavy metals.
Any questions?